Starting the recording, and here we are. Welcome, our very last Wildlife Wednesdays. We are so excited to be here and so excited to have Honorable Mike Holland with us today for our very last session. And before I start the bio, I just want to let you know that the Wildlife Wednesdays have been a huge success. We have had students from kindergarten all the way to grade 12, and those students actually interacting with each other. So it's lovely to see that we've had over 2,000 students touched by this initiative, and I know that we're going to continue for next year. So without further ado, here is Mike Holland. In his first venture into provincial politics, the Honorable Mike Holland has elected to the Legislation Assembly of New Brunswick in September 2018 for the riding of Albert and was re-elected in 2020 for a second term. He was reappointed as the Minister of Natural Resources and Energy Development following the 2020 election. Born in Chatham, now Miramichi, New Brunswick in 1970, Mr. Holland is the son of Phil and Brenda Holland. Farm raised in rural New Brunswick, Mr. Holland has been an avid outdoors person his entire life. He is co-founder of the Canadian Wild Turkey Federation, a nonprofit organization that is quickly becoming the new face of conservation in Canada. Mr. Holland has been a local entrepreneur who sold outdoor gear, which he invented. As a founder of Resources Redneck Inc., he successfully secured a funding partnership on the CBC TV show Dragon's Den, which is one of my favorite. So cool. Over the years, Mr. Holland has been active with many outdoors and conservation groups, serving in various capacities from volunteer to board member. Mr. Holland began gaining political experience in 2010, working as an executive assistant with cabinet ministers in 5 different provincial government departments. In his spare time, Mr. Holland enjoys exploring the outdoors with his 3 adult children and his partner, Allison. And without further ado, I am so excited to hand the floor over to Honorable Mike Holland.
Thank you very much, Deneen. I very much appreciate that introduction. I was thinking while you were doing it, I have to amend it a little bit. I have to add a grandson to that list of folks that we enjoy the outdoors with, and I need to remove my date of birth. I don't know how that ever made it in there.
Nonetheless, no need for that.
At the end of the day, I guess the gray hair is more indicative than any birth certificate I could possess. So I really appreciate being here. It's the last Wildlife Wednesdays. It's been a successful series. I want to thank you for taking that initiative and working with us, because I think it's so important for us to have an opportunity to highlight the outdoor lifestyle that's all around us here in New Brunswick and beyond. There's so many different places and experiences you can have, and I feel like this series has helped educate our youth a little bit more so that they can be more eyes open when they are in natural environments and more aware of their surroundings, aware of when they're out there. That's going to be very helpful, and that's going to enrich the experience, because a walk in the woods becomes more than just a walk in the woods when you actually learn a little bit more about what is all around you, whether it be the fauna in the form of our wildlife, the flora in the form of the different and numerous different vegetative species that are out there. But the woods can come alive when you get a little bit of subject matter knowledge, and that's been really accelerated thanks to this program. I certainly hope that this is although this is the last Wildlife Wednesday, it's not the last one ever. We'd like to talk about continuing and making sure that we continue to bring this information to the next generation that wants to be out there and enjoy the outdoors. Because you learn a lot about wildlife, but you learn a lot about yourself when you're in the midst of wildlife. And I have to say, as from a personal perspective, I enter into a lot of different pursuits as it relates to wildlife adventures, but the pursuit is a byproduct of the experience of the outdoors. And we live in a world where we're streaming this over the internet. While it's being streamed over the internet, people are getting 6 or 7 different messages at the same time. Every millisecond, something's coming at us at such a rapid rate that our filing cabinet upstairs here has a hard time processing it. And I find that when we take the time to disconnect and unplug and head into our natural environment, it gives our brain a chance to sort out all of the data that's come into that filing cabinet and properly, prepare it so that we can use it and have it and recall it. That break is very necessary, and the exercise we get in the outdoors is great from the neck down. It's also tremendous from the neck up. and it does a great deal of work to make us feel like we can be more productive when we come back home. So
Mr.
that's all.
Holland, before you begin or continue, I just want to let you know that we've had 2 or 3 classes sign in, so we have lots of students here to listen.
Awesome, that'd be great. I can't wait to talk a little bit more. I was saying earlier, I've done this presentation many times to very small groups, very large groups, and I will continue to do it as long as there's somebody that asks to hear a little bit about the wild turkeys. I've got a lot of history with the eastern wild turkey here in the province of New Brunswick. We can get into that to whatever degree we want later. I want to focus more on the actual bird itself. Here in New Brunswick, we have what is called the eastern wild turkey. Now, wild turkeys have been around a long time. They've been first recorded in sightings when the pioneers came from abroad and settled in America in the 1500s. At that time, the pioneers and the settlers, they actually brought the birds with them, but to their surprise, there were indigenous communities that were already using and harvesting and dealing with wild turkeys already. Reports in Central America and Mexico go back to 25 AD. So this is truly a dinosaur of a species that still exists and calls many different locations home. Here in New Brunswick, we're fortunate to have them. I'm going to tell you a little bit of the story about how they came to be in New Brunswick, but they suffered a very serious number of challenges in years gone by in the early ages. In the 1800s and more into the early 1900s, the wild turkey was seen as a significant food source, and so it was harvested in the wild to such a huge degree that their populations crashed to the point where extinction was a significant and real possibility. The numbers dwindled down into handfuls of birds, and not everywhere throughout the United States where they were primarily concentrated. But the efforts of conservation groups kicked in, and in 1973, an organization by the name of the National Wild Turkey Federation said that this is a bird that we need to take on as our namesake and do everything we can to reclaim it so that it can be a bird that is prolific throughout the United States. And a little fun fact, Ben Franklin, when they were debating and discussing what the official bird of the United States was, he was adamantly opposed to the bald eagle being chosen because he referred to it as a bird of moral ill repute. Now, I don't know what that means, but I read that in the history books, and he felt like the wild turkey was a much more presentable and noble species with which we should identify the United States with. So if Benjamin Franklin had his way, Thanksgiving dinner, the table might look a lot different for a lot of people over the years. But in 1973, the National Wild Turkey Federation really identified with the wild turkey as a bird that's a tremendous food source and also an important piece of the overall ecosystem. So they went to work to do a significant amount of effort to reclaim habitat that would be suitable for the wild turkey, create conservation areas that would be conducive to their growth, preserve forested areas for their roosting, ensure that nesting areas would be created. And man, it was an effort that really worked. That effort went from a handful of birds until we now have millions and millions of birds, and they live in every state with the exception of Alaska. And that's kind of why we have them here as well, because the NWTF, they moved and they did work up in Ontario as well in the 80s. And here in New Brunswick, we happen to be on a land border with the state of Maine. And over a number of years, and this is when I first started to be involved about 15 years ago, we started noticing the occasional wild turkey in the southwestern part of the province of New Brunswick. We thought, well, I guess they don't need passports and they have a land border with no restrictions. So we started to say, you know what? We've seen the history in the States. These birds will come into the province of New Brunswick. So we started working and we formed the Canadian Wild Turkey Federation in 2014. which now has chapters all over the country. But we started to do the same type of work, to work with governments and groups to ultimately put together habitat restoration programs and ultimately management programs. We do hunt them in the province of New Brunswick as they do in the lower 48 states. But these conservation groups, like the Canadian Wild Turkey Federation, like the National Wild Turkey Federation, indeed, they are organizations that promote the conservation, but also work to create opportunities for hunters to harvest the birds as well. And one of the interesting things about that is that almost sounds like a counterintuitive principle. You know, how can you be harvesting these birds in the form of a hunter and care about them? Well, you know, conservation starts with the fact that hunters are the basis from which that grows, and hunters put millions and millions of dollars into conservation efforts, which is what we evidenced with not just these two organizations, but a significant amount of them. And indeed, if they do want to hunt and harvest these birds, they do need to ensure that their populations are not just surviving, they're thriving. So we owe those organizations a great debt, because we're now seeing significant growth in the New Brunswick area as sightings that I've never seen before. 15 years ago, myself and a small group of people said, we need to watch this. The Department of Natural Resources needs to put plans in place to manage it. And there were many people that said, no, it'll never happen. It's only going to be a few. They won't survive here, and a variety of different issues that indicated that it wasn't going to be a population that we need to deal with. Well, you know, 15 or a dozen years later, we've seen that is true. The population has grown to the point where we have a significant population here in New Brunswick, and we have management programs with them. And so now I'm continually talking about what they are. This is a new species that many people have never seen before. I wish we were all in the same room together, because I'd ask the question, how many people have actually seen a wild turkey in the province of New Brunswick? 15 years ago, when I started asking those questions and having that conversation, there were very few hands raised. But now, virtually anywhere in the western part of the province, or southeastern even part of the province, when I ask that question, I see hands go up all over the room. So it says that indeed this is a burgeoning population, and it's important for us to educate folks about what these animals are and how to identify them, and a variety of different things. So that's why I have fun talking about wild turkeys, because there's a pretty good chance you're going to see one. There's 6 types of wild turkeys throughout the globe. We have the eastern wild turkey here, and that deals in, of course, the eastern range of North America throughout the New England states. There's the Osceola turkey, which is a little further down. All of these have little different nuances in their feather distinctions and colorations. The Osceola is down into the Florida, into that southeastern part of the United States. The Rio Grande turkey is a western bird. The Merriam bird, we have those in British Columbia and down through the northwestern part of the United States. Gould's turkeys are pretty specific to that Arizona, New Mexico area and Mexico. And then the 6th version is absolutely the most amazingly colored bird. It's the ocellated wild turkey, and they're in the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico, but you'll never have to guess if you see one of those. They look like something that's come off of a Broadway stage. They glimmer, they shine, they have all the colors of the rainbow. They have a peacock-esque look to them without the large tail feathers, and they're just a spectacular looking bird. So those species are what we're going to see here in Canada and the United States, basically North America, throughout the 3 jurisdictions. And there's a lot of activity as it relates to the work to preserve, to conserve, to build these populations, to manage them, to harvest them. And it's really something that would have not happened at all if some groups didn't step up and say, this is a bird that's on the brink of extinction. What can we do to help? The beautiful part was that this expansion came from exclusive broodstock that was legitimate. The expansion didn't come from cloned birds in a lab or some sort of hybrids. The limited amount of real live wild turkeys back in the day was what was used to be the broodstock. So, turkeys from the Midwestern Pennsylvania area is what really took off and built this all throughout. So it's really in the millions of a population throughout North America, and they're actually pretty exciting to see the first time you experience seeing a wild turkey for the first time. I'm going to tell you a little bit about some of the definitions around them, but I had it described to me, and I think it's a very accurate description, that they are absolutely the most beautiful, ugly bird you have ever seen in your life. They have feathers that just blend and are colored in such an amazing way. They're iridescent. When the sun hits them, it just looks spectacular until your gaze goes up to the weirdest shaped, ugliest head you're ever going to see. So it's a fascinating bird when you see them. They're certainly not like the birds that many of you may have been used to seeing growing up, pecking around a farmyard or something like that. In the wild, they're a significantly different creature altogether. The males, the mature males, are called toms, and those are males that are 2 years old and older. The females are called hens, and again, hens are a mature female that's 2 years old and older. Young or immature males are called jakes, and young or immature hens are called jennies. And the little chicks that come out of the eggs are called poults. And so that's what, if somebody indicates a tom, it's a mature male bird. If somebody says a hen, it's a mature female bird, and all of the other definitions that we've talked about. The coloration of them is spectacular. And like all bird species in the wild, the male species is a much more dynamic, colorful, and spectacular looking gender of the species. The colors are brighter, they're more iridescent. The head of a male wild turkey is very easy to identify because it is colored with red, white, and blue. And it's fascinating because they show their emotions through the skin color on their head. The head of a male wild turkey can be white 1 second, blood red the next, and completely sky blue the next. It's a fascinating thing to see. Usually you see those transformations when they're agitated, scared, or during the mating season. But I encourage you, if you have a chance to observe them from a distance during the spring, which is the mating season, to get some binoculars if you're in a spot where you can get them, because you're not going to get close enough to see them because they're a skittish creature for sure. And have a chance. The first time you see that coloration of the head change on a male, it's amazing. Now, on the other hand, the female is a rather dowdy, dreary, dull colored bird. Their head is more gray with some dulcet tones of blue. Feathers have.
If you don't have your mic off, can you please? Thank you so much. Sorry, Mike.
No problem. I thought somebody was doing a turkey call. I think that's my line a little later on. So the females, like most species in the bird world, they're more dowdy and drab and dull. They're smaller as well in size. A mature male wild turkey, going to see that tap out around 20 pounds. I've seen monsters that have been 24 pounds. I've seen most of them that are in the 18 to 20 pound range. Hens, however, are more in that 10 to 15 pound range max. The males are also indicated by a beard that comes out. It's actually feathers, but it looks like coarse hair, and it comes out of the center of their chest, and that's another signatory item that you can identify a male wild turkey with. Their senses are amazing. Understand, the wild turkey is one of the lower items on the food chain in the woods. They are susceptible to predation at a high level. There's a number of different critters in the woods that have a diet of wild turkey. So they had to develop senses. I wouldn't necessarily call them intelligent, but they have heightened their senses to the degree that it is very difficult to fool a wild turkey. They will see you before you see them, and if you see a wild turkey in the woods, it has already seen you. Make no mistake about it. Their eyesight is at the level of a bald eagle with 270-degree vision. I've been in the woods pursuing wild turkeys and had them look as though they were completely back onto me walking away, and I moved, and away they went, which meant they saw my movement. It's spectacular to think that they have that level of vision range that is so sharp, and it is. Their hearing is amazing. And if you're in the woods and you have a chance to experience this during the mating season, a female hen will make a call, and the hearing is better than any radar system that we have developed with electronic means. I've watched male turkeys zone in on a sound and come from hundreds of yards away to that specific spot because they've dialed in and triangulated that. It's amazing. They have very little sense of smell, which is probably good because a great deal of their diet comes from sticking their beak in some pretty nasty places. So I think that's probably an evolutionary trait that saved them a whole lot of grief for the sake of getting a meal. But they have incredibly heightened senses. And as I said, it's very rare that you will encounter them. You will see them if you're driving down the road on an edge of a field or in the middle of a field. You'll see them in the ditch of a road occasionally. But if you're in the woods in their realm, there's a real good chance you're not gonna see them. Now, as far as feathers go, barring the ability to have a live wild turkey here with me, which would be quite problematic, I've brought a sample of some of their feathers. The top long one is a wing feather. There's a tail feather in the middle, a breast feather here, just to give you an idea. This won't do justice to it, but if you had an opportunity to see that shimmering in the sunlight, it's amazing, and it's something that you won't forget when you see it. Now, how do they operate? How do they move? Well, we see them in the woods. And people will tell me all the time, I don't know if I have any turkeys here anymore. I used to see 20, and now I see one or two, or I see none. Well, wild turkeys have cycles of life, not unlike any other form of wildlife. And I'm sure you've heard about a lot of different routines from wildlife here over the Wildlife Wednesday series. But wild turkeys are a bird that flock together, as the old saying goes. And you'll find in the winter months, when conditions are their harshest, that you'll find large flocks of turkey. They gather together for the purpose of protection, strength in numbers. They find a food source. A lot of the birds are going to go there at the same time. So you'll see them flock up over the winter season. But then anytime around end of February, March, particularly once you start to get into April, these groups start to break up because more habitat becomes available. The food sources are more readily accessible. And these are birds that can range a significant area in the course of a day, week, month, season. And so they will then in the spring start to move around. And then there's another iteration of movement that takes place when we move into the mating season. Experts indicate that it's triggered by the phases of the sun and daylight. But not unlike white-tailed deer or moose or just about any critter that walks around the woods, there's a trigger that moves them into a mating season. And at that point, the males break off. And you're very rarely going to see groups of more than one, two, maybe four. If they're younger, sometimes a few more of them than that. But the old mature toms head in, and that's the time where they've got a brief period of time where mating is the only thing on their mind. In fact, they don't eat during that period of time. That's over a month where they don't even think about anything. So it's quite a spectacular period of time. And then they group back together again, and the hens then will lay eggs, 6 to 16 in a nest. Interesting fact that when they sit on that nest, they seem to be quite vulnerable to predators. Well, not really, because during that period of time, evolution's amazing. They emit no scent. So predators virtually don't know that they're there. Then the eggs hatch, the cycle repeats itself again. So I'm going to come in for a landing here very shortly, but I did want to, this is difficult to actually do live demonstrations, but because I can't have a wild turkey in my office and I'm not there with you. But I did want to do some of the vocalizations because not unlike humans, wild turkeys have a number of different vocalizations, just like us. They've got a language, so to speak. So I'm just going to go through a couple of different vocalizations, come in for a landing, and then I'd love to answer any questions or attempt to that you have.
Mike, I
turkeys.
was just going to let you know that you are more than welcome to go over. You are a wealth of information and we are enjoying this. So please don't feel time to a time. And I can't wait to hear the calls.
Okay, no, that sounds good. Well, people may have a different opinion when I finish with my comment.
It's only our opinion that matters.
So wild turkeys, and any animal species, if you immerse yourself in the environment, you start to think like them and you start to see patterns emerge and you actually start to learn the linguistics of these species. Now, I have spent a significant amount of time in the woods, and when I hear turkeys, I can tell exactly what's taking place. These birds roost in trees in the evening for protection. They prefer large pine trees is typically the location that they like. And then their day starts right around daybreak. And when it does, then they swoop down and away they go. And they begin their day. Usually you can hear male turkeys gobble. Now, Pete's daughter does a tremendous gobble. I don't. But I think anybody can imagine what a gobble is. It's a staccato, broken sound that sounds angry, no matter what time of year it is. And that tells you that these turkeys are awake. And then once daybreak hits, they fly down, and they won't till daybreak because that's when they can see the predators. And then, quite frankly, their job is to consist of feeding. The hens come down to feed. And here's the sounds that you'll hear with hens. I can't do a gobble. I'm going to leave that to your imagination. But when a hen flies down out of the tree, you can tell if they're flying down into the tree because they make this sound. That's called a fly down cackle. It'd be just, I imagine it would be not unlike myself jumping off of the roof of my house and hollering and screaming all the way down. It's an agitated sound until they hit the ground. And once they hit the ground, relatively close to the area with which they were roosting, they begin feeding. And as they feed, they talk back and forth. And I'm gonna give you an example of turkeys that have found an acceptable source of food. They feel safe, they're comfortable, and they feel like they're going to be in a position where they can settle in for a while and feed. So not unlike the cat that you have sitting at the end of your hallway, they purr. When you hear that in the woods, you are relatively close to a group of turkeys that are content, feeding. Most likely they'll probably have their head down. They're probably at the lowest level of alert that you're ever going to find them. And then when they are looking to talk to each other, they do it through clucks and yelps. A cluck is quite simply, as it sounds, a cluck. That's simple vocalizations that are saying, hey, where are you? I'm over here. And when they are in groups, they do that a lot because there is safety in numbers and they want to reach out to each other to have a constant kind of bead and triangulate where my friends are. So, imagine a group that's feeding and then talking to other people. Sometimes you can hear folks where some are feeding, some are calling out to their friends saying food's over here, whatever the case may be. I'm not prolific in turkey, but I know when I hear that sound, all of a sudden into the woods lines, you start seeing other birds coming their way. So that's what you see. Now, when they want to really reach out, they do what's called a turkey yelp. A lot of times this is what will attract male turkeys during the mating season. Any of these calls will, because they're looking for females, so they'll follow them. But this is one that'll catch the attention of a male turkey quite a bit. Bird might be sitting feeding. There's a male turkey that gobbles somewhere, and then the female moves into a yelp. That's essentially the turkey saying, a couple of clucks in there saying, hey, and the yelp says, I'm over here. And then the dance begins, because the male turkey, the tom, will gobble and say, no, you come over here. And the female turkey will say, no, you come over here. And it's fascinating to watch, because sometimes the toms win, most times the hens win. And at the end of the day, that's how they signal that they're up for hanging out together. And it's fascinating to watch. So there's a number of different calls that you can use. I think it's fitting with a classroom. I think I'm dating myself, but essentially all I'm using is a wooden striker on a chalkboard. So fingernails on a chalkboard. So that's the sound of a wild turkey. Some of you may have heard that and didn't know what it was. It's relatively new here in New Brunswick population. So those are a couple of vocalizations that can be put in your head. You can log as potential identifiers if you're out in the woods. A lot of times, if you hear a crow calling or an owl hooting, that'll trigger a turkey to gobble or to make vocalizations. It's fascinating. Hopefully, this is just one more way to allow you to enter into the woods with equipped and armed with more information that could help you spot, identify, locate, and see something that was around you before that you might have missed completely. So my hope is that this was something that helped out a bit, offered a little bit of information. Maybe you're better informed when we finished than when we started, and that's my hope. And the information can continue. And if we'd like to start talking and having questions or anything like that, I'd love to.
Awesome. Just let you know, Mike, when you put down your materials, your mic changed. I don't know if you want to take your mic off and put it back on again. It just it's a different sound now.
How am I now?
You're still a little bit far away.
How am I now?
That's okay. We'll just go with it. How about that?
Okay, yeah. No, I don't know what happened there. Sorry.
That's okay. Technology is always my friend, as my team knows. So I don't even know where to start, but thank you so much. That was absolutely lovely. And clearly, you know, a little bit about your passion and about your excitement around turkeys and what they do here in our province, but also in a global sense. So I was really happy. And a couple of things that I just wanted to mention is that I really want to meet the sixth turkey. Me and the sixth turkey are going to be friends for sure, if she's as flamboyant as I'm picturing. And I loved you mentioning, you know, that the beautiful ugly bird and you know, sometimes as students and as people, we go through these phases where we think we're not maybe the most beautiful, but there's always beauty inside. So I really love that you mentioned that. So I have a lot of questions, but I'm going to open it the floor because I'm getting all kinds of messages on a personal note to my emails and to my cell phone saying this is absolutely amazing. So I'll just open up the floor. There's a couple classes that are on. If there's any students that would like to ask questions, certainly feel free to put your camera on. We'd love to see some students waving at the camera, and to Honorable Mike Holland. No pressure, of course, but I'll just let the floor be open for a minute. And feel free to put your hand up as well. Oh, I see Gage Wilcox. Go ahead.
Hi, I was just curious, how do the turkeys actually end up getting their color? How does that come to be?
How do they get their color?
Yeah, is it a certain nature effect on like survival where they use their colors, or?
Great
Well,
question.
that is an absolute question. And quite frankly, experts believe that it is environmental from the 1500s on forward. They believe that it's an evolutionary trait based on the region with which they live. And it could be something that it blends more with the surroundings. But I think it's probably more, there's another set of experts that believe that it's tied mostly to diet and dietary differences in different regions. And what you're going to see is all five, with the exception of the ocellated turkey from the Yucatan Peninsula. What you're going to see on all five is probably 95% similarities with a 5% difference in the fringe. And mostly it's the tips of the tail feathers or the tips of the wing feathers that are different. So I would tend to side with the experts that speak to the fact that dietary and nutritional differences is what would make the difference in the coloration.
Thanks, Mike. That was informative.
Thanks, Gage. Gage, can you tell us where you're from?
I'm from St. Stephen.
St. Stephen. Well, welcome.
Thank you.
That's Gates. That's the home of the wild turkey here in New Brunswick, isn't it?
Oh yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Any other questions out there? People are being shy. I've got one question. I know, oh, I see, I'm not going to hog the floor. Okay.
Oh, I think you muted yourself.
Go ahead, Mr. Coughlin. Go ahead with your question, Jay.
Hello.
Hey.
How are
Hello.
you? We have a couple of students here that have a couple of questions. We're a grade 3 class from Sussex Elementary. We got on because we were just talking about wild turkeys and the wildlife in New Brunswick. So we thought it'd be a good time to learn a little more about the turkey.
Can I ask a favor for you to put your camera on, wave to us? We just love to see the students.
Well, I'm trying, but here it goes.
Oh, there they are.
There we go.
Hey.
Hello.
Guys, just duck that everyone else can see. So they're all spread out here.
Awesome. Well, welcome. All right, we've got some questions. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Dex.
Big do they get?
How big do they get?
Yes.
Well, it's certainly not as big as the wild turkey that you see in the grocery store, because those are raised on a farm and they're fed on a regular diet, so they get to be big. But the biggest wild turkey male that I've seen is about 24 pounds. Now that's with the feathers and the head and the feet and everything all together. So that would be what I would say would be the biggest. The average male wild turkey is going to probably be somewhere around 18 to 20 pounds though. And with the females being somewhere around, well, I've seen them as low as 5, 10. They're going to tap out not much more than the 10-pound range.
Thank you. We have another question. Go ahead, Levi.
Mike, your camera's off, just to let you know.
What
I can see
season?
Oh, yours
What
is off
season?
though?
Is my camera off?
Yeah.
I don't know how that happened. How's that?
You're back.
Okay, right on. Sorry. Yeah,
All
go
right.
ahead.
Go ahead, Levi.
What season do they nest?
They nest anytime near the end of May. It takes about 30 days to fully incubate and hatch a clutch of eggs. So what you're going to see is anywhere near the end of May in through to the end of June. And then we start to see the little poults anytime after that. But an interesting fact is in the event that a skunk or a raccoon or something raids a wild turkey nest and eats the eggs, we've seen them actually lay another clutch of eggs into July. We've seen poults sometimes as late as August. So they're a very resilient bird. Typically they're nesting in that period of May, but you know, they can throw us a curveball every now and then too.
All right, we have two more questions. Sam,
Right on.
be loud.
How did they get in New Brunswick?
Well, New Brunswick is very close to, in fact, it's a piece of the same land of the state of Maine. We have maps, so we think New Brunswick is a certain size, and it is. But right next to it is the state of Maine. Above us is the province of Quebec. Connected to that is the province of Ontario. And wild turkeys are what you would call a regionally migratory bird. They continually move in the search of food, and they continually march along their way. They can go as far as 20 miles or more in the run of a year. We're just getting some more data and stuff on that here in New Brunswick. But they have progressed in Maine as those numbers got large. They moved and came across the border and continued to move here into New Brunswick, where I've seen them in your area in Sussex, but I've seen them even as far out as the Salisbury area. That's quite close to where I am. So I've watched them over 15 years start in the Charlotte County area on the west side of the St. Croix River, and now we're seeing them proliferate all throughout southwestern New Brunswick, up the border, anywhere the border of New Brunswick touches Maine, and there's birds in Maine, we'll see them here in New Brunswick. They're going to come eventually.
Minister Holland, I have a question. You were talking about the migration into New Brunswick, and we started seeing them appear. So what were the numbers like early on, say like 2014 compared to now?
Well, I'm going to give you some comparisons. I'm going to use Maine. Last year, Maine had felt like they had had about 120,000, I think. I might be a little off on the number, birds last year. They feel like after the poll count this year, they're up to almost 200,000 birds. So the milder winters we've experienced have led to explosive growth in these wild turkey populations. So, Mr. Coughlin, quite frankly, I would not be able to give you a definitive answer as to what our populations were. Estimates in 2014 indicated 2,000+ birds in the province of New Brunswick. However, since we've been managing them over the last 3 years, I feel like we've significantly underestimated that number, and that number would be much higher, into the thousands. So, and then add the good winters that we've had, and I think that this is a population that's on the increase in a significant way.
Thank you very much for answering our questions. Thanks for the presentation. It was fantastic.
I appreciate you guys very much. Thank you.
Have a good day.
You too. And it's
Awesome.
important to note, Danine, on that made me think of another item. One of the things that we've been committed to in DNR in the province of New Brunswick is the expansion and the development of our protected and conserved land in the province. And actually, not a lot of people know this, but as of December of 2022, I signed into effect the absolute largest, most historic move to protect the most amount of land that we have ever done in the history of the province of New Brunswick. We have doubled the protected natural areas on Crown land in the province of New Brunswick. We have added almost 400,000 hectares into protected and connected land. To give you a little context on that, that's the equivalent of us adding the size of 19 Fundy National Park size blocks of land into conservation here in the province of New Brunswick. Now, one of the things that the NWTF and the CWTF and all conservation organizations realize is that they were working to build and grow habitat that would be beneficial to the wild turkey. But a byproduct of that is that if it's good for the wild turkey, it's good for upland, it's good for large mammals. You know, that when you do conservation work to build habitat, it's like the old saying goes, the incoming tide rises all the boats in the harbor, and many, many species benefit. We're on the front end of some very beneficial times as it relates to wildlife populations here in the province of New Brunswick. We've taken steps to ensure that many, many more species are born than die here in New Brunswick.
So interesting. And I'm just being mindful of time, but certainly if anybody has any questions, you can put your hand up. But I am beyond excited now about turkeys. Oh, I have one more question. Gage, let's go ahead.
I just wanted to come back on the your belief on the colors and how they actually come to be. Do you side more with, you think it's a dietary explanation, or do you think it's more of an evolutionary?
Well, I know that there's usually a direct cause and effect in a rather fast fashion when we ingest something into our body. You know, we can see the results of physiological changes rather quickly when we ingest something into our body. So I would say it's both and, not either or. Evolution, of course, will play a role in all of us. I mean, we look different than we did 10,000 years ago, and we will probably look different 10,000 years from now. So evolutionary, according to the habitat, would be a factor for sure. But I think that the most rapid cause and effect would be a result of dietary changes and differences within those regions where those birds are. That would be, but understand, that's not coming from a scientist. That's coming just from anecdotal knowledge and the research that I've done.
So you believe it's a bit of both, not just either side?
Yeah,
You know?
I would have to say, because I know that both have an effect, and we're dealing with a bird that sightings go back to 25 AD. Of course, we didn't have anything to record or print or do a photograph of them back then. I would be fascinated to see what they would look like back then. And I will guarantee you that what a wild turkey looks like today is not the same as what that wild turkey looked like in 25 AD.
Awesome. Okay, we lost your camera again there, Mike.
I
Um,
know, I know.
Gage, it sounds like you are very interested in the topic and maybe something that you're thinking about for your future career. So certainly feel free to reach out to me, Deneen Diamond at the Center of Excellence for Health, if you wanted maybe to have some more connections with the folks that we can maybe answer some of your questions. I think it's wonderful to see a student very passionate and excited about the topic. So certainly feel free to reach out to the Center of Excellence for Health, and we can help maybe hook you up with a mentor. And this is what exactly Wildlife Wednesdays is all about. I'm just going to say thank you again. I do need to say thank you, and hopefully Pete's going to put on his camera and do a last little thank you to the folks that have been part of the initiative. Pete Stroder has been the backbone behind this initiative with myself, and we decided we were going to do this about a year ago, and had a lot of closed doors, and we said, no, we're going for it, and here we are. And I will say probably that, next year is going to be bigger and better. And I would even love, I don't want to put you on the spot, Honorable Mike Holland, but wouldn't it be lovely to have a full gymnasium of students with a live end of the season of Wildlife Wednesday? So if you're saying yes now, I am writing that down just to let you know this is recorded. And Pete, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Yeah,
Before you go to Pete, yes, absolutely.
Awesome. I love it. Thank you so much. This has been absolutely amazing, and I've learned so much. Thanks. Go ahead, Pete.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thanks, Minister, for showing up here today and like your passion. I've seen it before. You come through the screen just like you do in person, and it's awesome. I'm sure we've inspired some future turkey fans here, and they can all join the CWTF and be part of the chapters around the province, which you've done a great job of helping to support through all the work that you do personally and professionally. So awesome. Keep it up. I already did have you chalked in for next year, by the way. So just thanks for confirming that. We'll get down to the specifics of that later on. Deneen, thank you very much. I'm with the Department of Tourism, and we have this initiative to really grow the outfitting and guiding industry and expose people to what the great outdoors that we do have in New Brunswick is. And this has been a wonderful window into a little bit about what we actually have as resources, and also the human element of just being out in the woods and waters and really understanding what what we have in our very backyard. Like we're driving down the highway, we're seeing turkeys. Now we know how to find moose. We know how to identify fish. We know how to take wildlife photography. Like we've learned so much this year that it's been awesome, and I hope we get a chance to continue. So thank you very much.
Awesome. Thanks again to everybody that was involved. I know there's going to be a lot of folks that are listening to this that probably have participated. So taking the time and energy out of your very, very busy days to share about your passion really touches my heart, but I know has touched the hearts and the minds of many students in our province. So from the Center of Excellence from Health, we are so excited and thankful to have the initiative, and Wildlife Wednesdays is signing off for 2022-23. Have a great day and get outside.